So I'm happy to continue with our presentation here. And we'll be getting into more of the strikeouts and home runs, these projects that went really well and the projects that didn't go so well. And we have words of advice from the homeowners that have done both. This segment was inspired by the Blue Jays run to the World Series for sure, but I think it captures a lot of good information. So I thought we'd keep running with it there. Sweet. I'm going to dive into our model a bit more after the case studies, but at the highest level, the Toronto Home Energy Network, we're a nonprofit. We're not here to sell you anything, and we want you to make the right choice for your home, for your values, for your budget, for your family, what you're interested in. That's what we're here to do, and we want to get you the right resources and talking to the right people at the right time for that project. Okay, so starting with the home runs, the mantra you can keep in mind while I'm describing this project is helping hands. And to contextualize that a little bit more, we're going to introduce Harvey and Susan, who got the heat pump in spring of this year. I'll give some background on their project in just a second. But I love this quote, like, we went in knowing nothing. We just were climate motivated, and our energy advisor, who was Sarah, uh, really held our hands, and it was really great. And the second part of the quotation that I want to draw your attention to is we've never had it so good here, and we've been in this house for 30 years. That's just building on more of what Sarah was saying with the comfort benefits of installing heat pumps. So I'm going to dive into what their actual project is with that sort of high level context on who Harvey and Susan are. So their home is a 1949 detached home in York Center, so just north of the 401 there. And they were historically reliant on radiators connected to a gas boiler to provide all of their heating. And they had a cantankerous old AC to provide them cooling in the summer. And they wanted a big energy efficiency upgrade on their home. That was their motivation for starting to look into this project. And they started their research in 2024 and had their heat pumps go in this spring. So their project was they added two ductless cold climate heat pumps. So that was just what Sarah was talking about in the second segment there, as well as some solar panels. And the twist with their project, and why I wanted to bring it up as a case study, is they kept their radiators as backup heat as well. So let's dive into those three wins and what I think we can take away if we're interested in getting a heat pump in our own homes as well. So first, they took their time, explored their options with those helping hands with them as well. So they called up Sarah, or you can call up another energy advisor, or we call them retrofit advisors as well. And this is a much less stressful option than finding yourself in the middle of January with a dead furnace, thinking, oh, I'm interested in heat pumps, but I kind of procrastinated doing my research and planning. Can we get it done? I'm trying to get all these space heaters in my apartment in the meantime. My spouse is pissed. Much nicer to plan and think about your options ahead of time there. So I think that's one thing that Harvey and Susan did a really good job of. They also had their heat load calculation. If that's a new term for you, don't worry. I'm going to define it in the next slide as well. But it's just this emphasis on doing the measurements ahead of time. So we have this clear understanding of how much heat is actually needed to keep you cozy in the winter. So they had this calculation done so they could install the right heat pumps at the right size for their home so they could go into this first winter with a lot of confidence that they're going to work out for them. And they kept their radiators as backup heating just in case. So as we mentioned, they got the cold climate ductless heat pumps. So if it ever gets down to that level where the cold climate heat pumps can't keep up, and we saw some questions about this in the chat, and so we'll get into that in the Q&A. The radiators are there to flip on and give them some backup heating as well. So for them, this was a kind of a nice middle ground. They didn't get all the way off gas, but in these first couple winters, they're going to see how they feel with their home comfort with the new heat pumps. And the hope is that in a year or two, when they're feeling very confident, they'll be able to open up this file again and totally disconnect their gas. So in this way, they've got heat pumps. They didn't have to rip out their old radiators. They're still there in the background, but they're going to be using significantly less gas this winter than they have in the past. So just diving in again, the takeaway from this slide as I define heat load is it's a really good thing to ask about when you're going into this project to get a heat pump in your home. Your heat load's just a number that tells you how much energy it takes to heat your home. It takes a lot of different things into consideration, like how drafty your home is, how much sun it gets, your insulation. So it's a bit of extra work to get this done, which is why sometimes HVAC installers might skip this process and do things like rule of thumb, saying, hey, square footage is enough. I can make a good enough guess on this. We don't recommend going that route. Doing a little bit of extra heat load calculations, which energy advisors are there to help you do, will give you a lot of confidence in your heat pump installation. Of course, that calculation, it takes a little bit of technical training, so energy advisors there, and we hear from them that the energy bills are the best way to help discover this heat load. This isn't modeling or projections about what it might be. It's you used this much gas to heat your home last year. We can do calculations based on your actual usage in your home. So we really recommend retrofit advisors and energy advisors being brought in early on the process so you can get that heat load calculation figured out before you start thinking about models, before you're looking at prices. This is a good way to start. So ask about heat load is definitely the takeaway from this section. So I'll dive into the strikeouts, and the mantra that I want you to kind of take in here is trust but verify. And to contextualize that, we're going to talk a little bit about Margaret, who's in Seton Village. She installed a hydronic heat pump. So she went air to water. She wanted to totally get off gas. That was her motivation. And it was actually in her second winter. She did an entire winter on a hydronic heat pump and had no problems at all. When she discovered that it hadn't been set up properly. On a particularly cold January night, her heat and power suddenly went out. The breaker for her heat pump was blown out. So this is exactly the sort of stressful situation that we bring up in a webinar now, not to scare you, but to say, hey, what can we learn from Margaret's situation? What did she tell us that she would do differently next time? What are her words of advice on this? So you don't find yourself in this situation, cold, calling up contractors, trying to get emergency work done on your home when it's cold out. So a little bit more context on Margaret's project. She has a 1907 semi-detached home in Harvard Village, so one of those century homes there. She's climate motivated, so she's been making updates, insulation and solar to her home since 2007. So definitely innovator, forward-looking in this space. And the heat pumps were one of the more recent projects that she brought into her place. As we mentioned, wanted to get off gas completely, but a missed wire in the hookup meant the backup heat from the electric water heater was never connected. So when it got really cold, the heat pump had to work too hard. The system was designed in a way where a backup heat was meant to click in at this time, but it didn't end up happening that way. And so there was a power surge as the heat pump sped up to try to meet that demand, and it actually damaged the breaker and some of the components of the heat pump as well. So a lot of stress, a lot of frustration. Fortunately, the parts were under warranty. She was able to get some of that replaced, install the surge protector. But we do definitely owe a debt to Margaret for being a bit of an early adopter in this space and figuring out some of the things that we can do differently. So contextualizing that mantra of that trust but verify. If you're going to go the hydronic heat pump, the air to water route, she definitely recommends having the installer show you all the components, how things hook up, how they work. Basically, what I take away from that is saying, again, this is still on the front edge of things in Toronto, so you have to be a little bit more of an expert in your system if you want to go the hydronic route. But for some people, it's going to be very exciting, and it's just a conversation to have with your installer to make sure that there's good information traveling both ways as things are getting installed. The second thing she mentioned is monitor the way the appliance is installed and ask for a checklist from the installer. She sent us one, which we'll share in the handout with you with the recording tomorrow as well. But that's really where this trust but verify conversation comes in. It can feel a little bit nerve-wracking to be involved in your contractor's work. They're an expert, but hopefully they have good bedside manner and they're willing and excited to embrace your interest in what's going on in your own home there. So this isn't meant to, create an adversarial relationship between you and your installer, but there's things on that checklist like, making sure the disposal of old equipment is scheduled. Just these little things that might get missed when you're focused on the bigger picture. And the last thing she said on a bit of a lighter note is ask about a phone app to track your systems in real time. This is getting into that smart thermostat conversation. Those have been on the market for a long time. And so you get a little bit more control and insight into how your system's working. And that's kind of a fun thing to have that control and understanding of what's going on there. So we have Margaret's three pieces of advice there. And a lot of this boils down to the contractor that you're using. So we have a couple ways where you can find trustworthy contractors for your project. We have case studies, which Jake has been posting in the chat, and you can flip between the different case studies and you'll see project budgets as well as the installers that people were using. In Margaret's case, she didn't recommend the installer that she used, so you won't see her installer there. But most other people are very happy with their projects and willing to recommend contractors there. If you're going the hydronic route, you just want to make sure you're upfront about that and understand their experience. The other way is retrofit advisors or energy advisors like Sarah have a network of contractors that they've worked with and will be able to recommend people to you. The Home Retrofit Forum is a really excellent Facebook group. People are very attentive and answering questions very quickly, and you can post about your project there. Or alternatively, you can look into the chat and see historically, if you just look up like contractor or something like that, you can see who other people are recommending. But it's always great to just introduce your project and some of the roadblocks, and people are very willing to help out there. And the last of the four, there's certified installer databases. That just means that contractors have done a little bit of extra work to get vetted to appear on these directories like Toronto Clean Services Directory and the Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Institute of Canada's Heat Pump Champion Advocate Directory, which is a mouthful, but it's a helpful resource. So we'll have links for those in the chats and sending them out tomorrow as well. Okay, so we're going to transition just to close up the webinar before we move into the Q&A with just a couple words about our community support model. And I'll prompt Jake here to throw up our final poll, which is just asking people about your next steps and what kind of support you'd be interested in going forward. And our model is just based on neighbors giving neighbors honest advice. People aren't trying to sell you when you're talking to your neighbors. And we facilitate those neighbor exchanges through things like heat pump parties where you're demonstrating the technology, or energy audit parties where Sarah or another energy advisor comes around and sets up the blower door, comes with thermal cameras, and show you exactly where those drafts are sucking all the heat out of your home and how to fix it. I went to one last week, and it's honestly fun. It's got all the energy of a science experiment. It's like going with the thermal cameras, and it's like, and you really want to fix it when you see drafts through the thermal camera. It just creates that energy. So I really love that. So we want in-person and digital support for people that want heat pumps here. And that in-person support, we're expanding our partner communities. This is just groups we work with across the city to facilitate these parties and spread out resources and education. So we have partner communities in Parkdale High Park, Seton Village, and the Pocket Change project in the east, and the Greener Homes Bedford Park in the north, and Harvard Village Net Zero in the center. And we're always expanding that. And also, we want to be in places of work or faith groups. These are also great opportunities to spread information and have the conversation about heat pumps there. So on our website as well, you'll see under communities, we have a partner communities directory where you can access all of these pages and get in contact with them if you find that they're in your neighborhood. I know there's a couple people from Seton Village joining, so that's a great project there. So I mentioned the Home Retrofit Forum. This is just another plug to go and join that and introduce yourself and your project there. And the last thing I'll say before I close up here is we've just released Your First Heat Pump Guidebook, which is a digital resource for especially people who are brand new to this heat pump conversation, who didn't really think of it as an option before, but want to understand what needs to happen to their homes, what works well in certain kinds of homes than others, what rebates are available, what are the costs, what are the speed bumps. We put it all together here in this one document, and we'll link that in the chat for the download, and we'll send it in the handout tomorrow. And we're updating this, but a good way to keep up with our work as well is joining our fun and infrequent newsletter, where we're sharing other events and electrification updates there. So I'll finish by plugging that and thanking our funders. Toronto Hydro is one of our funders, and the Toronto Atmospheric Fund is one of our funders, thanking our speakers, and thanking all of you. We were excited about the energy and the questions that people were having about this. So we're actually going to end the recording section now and move into the question and answer phase. So if you've been holding on to any questions, this is a good time to get those out as I'll move into that section now.